Good morning, everybody, and welcome to Introduction to Building Mobile Apps with Salesforce1, No Code Required. Today we are going to talk about how you can leverage all of the things that you've already built on Salesforce and turn them into mobile apps without using any code. My name is Shannon Hale. I'm a product manager here at Salesforce on the platform. My title officially is Senior Product Manager for Declarative Apps, and I get a lot of people asking me what declarative means. And we sometimes mention it during webinars and other things, so I'll just state it outright. Basically, declarative are all of the point-and-click tools that you use to customize Salesforce, like page layouts and schema builder and formula engine, workflow, all of those things that allow you to build stuff on our platform without actually writing any code.
And I am Michelle Chapman-Thurber. I'm a tech writer here at Salesforce, and I'm also the author of the Salesforce1 App Admin Guide.
Since this is a Salesforce webinar, we have to throw out the safe harbor statement here. If you are not familiar with the safe harbor statement, it basically says that we are a publicly traded company and you should not make any purchasing decisions on stock or even product based on any future-looking statements that we might make during this webinar. I'm not planning on making any future-looking statements, but if something comes up in the questions at the end, do keep this in mind when you're making purchasing decisions and only make decisions based on current functionality. I came across this article not too long ago on the BBC News website, and it really sort of struck a chord with me, and it basically said that 2013 was the year that we all went really mobile, and they weren't just talking about devices, they were really talking about more of a state of mind. And they were saying, one of the quotes that I really appreciated was, we're talking mobile workforces staying connected in and out of the office and using their devices for work and play. The line between what we use our phones for and our tablets and other mobile devices is really blurring now. I know personally, as a product manager, I spend a lot of time in email, I spend a lot of time on Twitter talking to our customers and various other venues, and it's not unusual for me to be answering emails outside of work hours and wherever I am, really. So the idea that we're doing more and more of our day-to-day work from our phones is actually becoming more and more common. And if we look at the number of unit sales for large companies, these numbers really bear us out. The number of the purchase of mobile devices is far outstripping PCs at this point. But at the same time, when you talk to a lot of customers, they don't really feel like they have a mobile strategy, or they're not ready to move into mobile and start building mobile devices for their employees, even though their employees are moving in that direction. And part of the reason for this, some of the reasons for this, are that it can be kind of expensive to build mobile apps. You have to have a specialized developer. You have all of these different devices, Android and iOS, and Android itself has a whole bunch of different parameters to it. There's lots of different platforms, and so the number of people who, even if they feel that having a mobile strategy is important, the number of customers who are actually deploying mobile apps or who have developed that mobile strategy and are moving forward with it is actually only about half of the people who should be.
As Shannon mentioned, there is a gap between having your apps and getting them mobile, but Salesforce1 bridges that gap and takes care of everything for you, right out of the box without you having to do anything. Your apps are ready for mobile. However, with a little customization, you can make your user's experience with those apps in the mobile space even easier and more robust. All your apps, your workflows, your processes, and all your customizations are now available in a mobile form, so that you don't have to worry about it. This is why we're really excited about Salesforce1. As administrators, you're already familiar with all the customization tools you'll see here on the bottom row. And even if you haven't dipped into them yourself, you're probably at least aware of the APIs and other developer resources on the top row. The Salesforce1 platform adds all these extra features like actions, compact layouts, mobile cards, embedded charts to help you as point-and-click admins make your Salesforce content more mobile-ready and mobile-friendly without needing to touch any code. As administrators, you have a big influence on how your users will work in Salesforce1 and the power to make their mobile experience almost effortless with just a few customizations. We will talk about all of these new Salesforce1 point-and-click features today.
I think one of the things you mentioned there, Michelle, that's really important to call out is that you probably already have a number of customizations that you've already built on the platform, all of this stuff in the bottom row and some of the things on the top row if you have a developer or a development team in your organization. And you're really already building on Salesforce1. Like, it's all part of the same platform.
Right.
We're just going to talk today about some of the new tools that you might not have seen before that will actually help you really focus your apps for mobile.
Right, but before we jump into customizing your org for Salesforce1, there are a few things that we should consider when you're going to build for a mobile experience. What kinds of information are your users going to be looking for when they're using Salesforce1 on their mobile devices? What are the important business moments in their day? What kinds of things are they going to be doing with Salesforce1 out there with their mobile devices? When the users are working with the records or actions, what fields are essential to the work they're doing and which ones aren't? And can you set up default or predefined values for some fields to streamline the work they're doing?
I think that's enough slides. Let's actually get into the nitty-gritty and build something. One of the key things about Salesforce1 that Michelle talked about is that if you're on this webinar, I'm assuming you're probably already a Salesforce customer and you've done some kinds of customizations in your organization already. And you may have built some custom apps or you may have installed custom apps from the App Exchange. And so you probably have custom objects, custom fields, page layouts that you've already customized, all as part of Salesforce. And in this example that we're going to talk about today, we're looking at an organization that has built a custom delivery app on Salesforce. So they are a specialty foods company. They are delivering foods to restaurants around the Bay Area from their distribution center. If you look at a typical deliveries app for them, they have information about accounts, and we're all familiar with the accounts tab. We have deliveries, and we have return items, which are things which are returned. If we go into our deliveries list here, and we actually take a look at a delivery, we can see information about where it's going, who's driving, when it's scheduled, and what's on the truck. And there's some open activities here that are assigned to the driver. So all of these are things that this organization would have built, or that you've probably built something similar in your org, and are probably using it already. But if you think about the driver, for example, if we go with Dawn the driver here, and what her day-to-day stuff is, she's probably not carrying Salesforce around on a laptop or a desktop, certainly in her truck. She's probably going into work in the morning and she's picking up a clipboard with a bunch of pieces of paper on it and says, here are your destinations. But then if things change throughout the day, if something needs to go somewhere else or they need her to pick up a new delivery, there's a whole lot of logistics going on that actually has to happen in order for her to get through her day. So if we look at what Salesforce1 might look like for this particular driver, and here I'm just going to use the iOS emulator rather than dealing with switching between different machines on the webinar. And we just sign in as driver. So this is what Dawn Driver sees when she first logs in to Salesforce1. We start out on the feed page. We have notifications up here, and it appears that Dawn has two new notifications. One of them says, hey Dawn, I added a box of our new dessert pierogies to your truck. And the other one says that you have a task assigned to you. So we can actually see in the notifications as of Spring 14 that there's a task assigned to me, and I can take a look at the task. And it says drop off the dessert samples for delivery 68. Okay, good to know. So I'll go back to my feed. The second thing that we see, if we click on the hamburger up at the top there, is we have our navigation on the left-hand side. And this has our feed, which is, of course, the page we just came from, people, groups. And down here we have a number of recent items. And this is deliveries, accounts, return items, and other objects that I have access to in Salesforce. Now in this case, Dawn the driver has a very specific role in Salesforce. She doesn't have access to a lot of things that she doesn't need to know about, so it's really for her, it's just deliveries, accounts, return items, and contacts. We also have our dashboards, and as a driver, Dawn can see what her stats look like. She's pretty good. She's delivering most of her stuff on time. She has a few that are within a window. The drivers have a 15-minute delivery window, and there's sometimes when she's late, which is going to happen. I don't know if you haven't been to the Bay Area, traffic around here is enough to make anybody late some of the time. Never mind finding parking. So the first thing that we can customize in Salesforce1 is actually this mobile navigation, and we'll go super quickly and just take a look at it. If we go into Setup and do a quick search for mobile navigation, we can see that the things that are in the right-hand side here are selected, feed, people, groups. There's also something called Smart Search Items, and the Smart Search Items are the things that you're seeing under Recent here. And in this case, the things that are going to show up in here are going to be things that your users click on frequently in the desktop version of Salesforce, in this case, deliveries or accounts or items. And there are also things that your users have pinned to their search results. So if they are almost always working in deliveries, they may have pinned deliveries to the top of their search results page. And I'll actually show a screenshot of that later on when we come back to this. So looking again quickly at our deliveries app here, click into deliveries, and here are the list views that we just saw on the deliveries tab when we were looking at it in the desktop app. We were looking at the All Deliveries app. There were our recent deliveries. So these are your list views and your recent items all combined into a single page, and you can also search for them at the top. Now in this case, My Deliveries is a list view that is the deliveries that are on my truck right now in the order that they need to be delivered today. And so we have at 9 a.m., we have a delivery going to the Bottle Cap. 10, we have Dittmer's Gourmet Meats and Wurst House, Suede Glue. This is actually the My Deliveries list view. It's showing the first 5 columns from list view. And if we click into the record, we can see this is the same delivery record that we looked at earlier. Here's where it's going. Here's more details about the delivery, status, how many items are on it, when it's due, and so on and so forth. If we move over to the right-hand window, this is the related information page, and it shows our related lists for the object. And if we go to the left-hand side, we have our Twitter feed. Chatter was on Twitter earlier. Now it's Chatter. All right. So, and if we click on the plus sign, we see all our typical Chatter actions. So this is all right out of the box without doing any further customization of your org. Anything that you've already customized is available in Salesforce1 right out of the box. And this is pretty good. But let's think about how we can really make this better for this particular user. And the first thing that I want to think about, if we think about the list that Michelle talked about earlier of what's the most important information to the user, and we'll start with what we call the anchor card up here at the top. Right now it says delivery-00062, and I don't know about you, but if you're like me, auto number is about the least memorable thing about any record. I have no talent for memorizing arbitrary strings of random numbers. So let's see if we can start out by making this particular piece of information something that's going to jump out and tell the user exactly what they're doing or what they're looking at when they look at this record. So we'll go to the deliveries object. Now the card information at the top there is controlled by something called a new piece of data, metadata called compact layout. And by default, we give you a compact layout out of the box. And for standard objects, we have fields that we think are probably important to you. We kind of know what's important for an account or an opportunity. For a custom object, we don't really know anything about the object other than its name and maybe the last modified date. The last modified date doesn't seem like it's probably the most important information for you. So we can create a new compact layout. And on it, we will put, if we think about the driver, things that are important here, probably when it's due and where it's going, and maybe current status, and maybe then the delivery number. And once we create it, we'll actually assign it. You can have multiple compact layouts, and they can be different for every record type for an object. So if you're using record types, if for deliveries, for example, we had an air delivery versus a truck delivery, we could create different compact layouts for air versus truck, and that way you would get the important information for that type of delivery. But in this case, we only have the one, so we're going to change it to our new one. And having done that, if we go back to the emulator here, I don't have to worry about packaging my app and putting it up on the App Exchange and having anyone download the new app. All I have to do, refresh the window, and boom, there we have the latest information. So compact layouts are also used for a couple of other things, and one of them is that if you have Chatter publisher actions, which we released in summer of 2013, they're used in the card that gets generated when it creates a feed item. So if you have something that creates a new account, for example, it shows you 3 or 4 fields about an account, that's the same layout that gets used for that. And it also gets used for something else called mobile cards, which I'll talk about in just a minute. But while we're still on this page, if we think about the most important moments in the life of this particular record for a delivery driver, what does a delivery driver do over and over during the day? They probably they drop a delivery off so someone has to accept it. They might have to log an exception if the delivery is damaged in some way. They might, if they're running late, they might change the estimated time of arrival. Maybe they have some kind of back-end integration that's going to send a text message to the restaurant owner. All of these are sort of things that this driver does really frequently. And the driver can edit the field, or edit the record, and basically go in and change the status. So if I were accepting this delivery, I could say accepted, and I could say that it was accepted by whoever the owner of the restaurant is. But that's a lot of, even you can see here, that's a lot of scrolling around and clicking and so on. So if we think about ways that we can make the driver more efficient here, we can use the actions here to write really specifically scoped actions to help them out. So we'll find these on the delivery page under buttons, links, and actions. You're probably already familiar with custom buttons and links. And we have a new type of action here. I've got a couple created already, but in this case, let's look at what would be the action if the delivery driver went in and the box was damaged, or the food was spoiled, or something else happens that they couldn't actually make the delivery, so they have a delivery exception. So we'll create a new action. We have different types of actions. One of them is to create a new child record. One of them is to log a call, which creates a call task. You can create custom visual force actions. You can also create custom canvas actions, coming in string 14. And the one we're going to do right now actually updates the existing record we're on. So when we're on a delivery record, we'll do some kind of update to the delivery record. And we're going to call it log exception, assuming I can type. The standard labels, we provide you some out-of-box labels for really typical actions, and if you want to use these, the advantage of them is that they're automatically translated. So if it was sort of a change status kind of action, it would automatically be translated if you had multiple languages in your organization. For this case, since our label doesn't really fit any of those standard labels, we're just going to go with the manual version, which we could still translate later, but we'll go with this for now. And we'll click Save. And we're presented with a layout for the form that we're going to build for this particular action. And if we think about the important, again, we're going back and thinking about how we're going to build this for a mobile device. If the things that we're thinking about here are what are the most important things that need to be filled in for this, there's probably 4. There's the reason for the exception, accepted by, because maybe the whole delivery wasn't quite blown away and we had somebody sign off of it on it. The other 2 things that that are probably important are the time that it was delivered and the status. But we know in this case that status is going to be exception, and we know that the time is actually going to be the time that the driver performs the action, the time that they deliver the object or make the delivery. And so we don't actually have to require the user to fill those in manually because we can programmatically determine those. So if we save the form with just those 2 fields on it, we can add something called a predefined field value. And we can set the actual time, and we can use the formula editor, and we can use now. So this will be the time that the action is actually saved. And we can set the status to exception. And the other thing that's kind of interesting about predefined field values is they're set through the API. And so for actual time, if we drill into this field and we take a look at it, and we look at the field level security, this is actually a read-only field for the delivery driver. We don't actually let the delivery driver set the actual time of the delivery manually. We don't want them to go in there and do that in the regular page layout. The only way they can do that is through this action. And so this is a good way to control how people set certain values. If you need them to set values together, sometimes you have a field that you need to be filled in if you're changing another field. We can do that through validation rules. But now if they're fields that are often performed together, you can put them in an action together and have them set that way. All right. So the other thing that we have to do after we create our action is we have to add it to the page layout. And we'll add it to our driver layout. Now by default, the actions on a layout are inheriting from the global layout, and the global publisher layout is the publisher layout that you'll see on the chatter tab and on your feed. And in this case, we have it's assigned per profile. In this case, I'm logged in as the administrator, and I have different actions that my driver has. But on the page layout, we can override the actions. And we'll just drag out these old ones, and we'll add the things that this driver does most frequently are accept the delivery, set ETA, log exception, and maybe we still want to allow some chatter functionality like posts. So let's quickly save that and go back to our simulator and refresh. And now we see that the actions that are there are the four most common actions for this delivery driver. And if we think that in this particular delivery there was an exception, one of the items was damaged, we can log an exception. We can say that the driver or the restaurant owner accepted it. Maybe that's Fabian. And the reason was damaged boxes. And we'll submit that. can see we get a little toaster saying our log exception was performed. The other thing that we can see here is if we go to our chatter feed, update actions don't create a feed item by default, but if there's chatter feed tracking enabled on some of the fields that were updated, it will trigger chatter feed tracking for that. And so we can see that we changed accepted by to Aman Fabian. We changed actual time from a blank value to the current time that we executed the action. And we changed the status from in transit to exception. So we can see that we did all those things. My last trick, if we go back to this page with our related content on the delivery, and we think about other information that might be useful to see on this object, we have the account here, and we can drill into the account and get more information of it. But sometimes you know how in Salesforce on the desktop version, if you hover over the account name, you can see a little hover window that shows you more information about the account. We actually have an equivalent for that in Salesforce1, and it's called a mobile card, and it shows up on the related information page. So if we go back to the delivery object, and go back to our page layout, if we scroll down here to the mobile card section, and these only show up in Salesforce1, we can drag basically any lookup field that we have on the delivery item, on the delivery object that looks up to another object. We can put a mobile card in here, and so we can add the account mobile card so we can look up to the account. We could even look up to the driver if we wanted. But in this case, the driver this is the driver's page layout. I'm pretty sure they know that they're the driver, so it's probably not important information for that user. So we're not going to put it on this layout. And if I go back, and again, all I have to do is refresh. I don't actually have to do anything special. I can now see information about the account, the Bottle Cap restaurant, located in San Francisco, California, and here's the phone number. And the information on this card is also controlled by the compact layout, but it's the compact layout for the lookup object, so in this case, the account. And I think that is basically all I have to show you for the demo, so I will turn it back to Michelle.
So here's a quick summary of the things that Shannon just covered in the demo: notifications, mobile navigation, list views, compact layouts, mobile cards, and actions. And we're going to look at each one individually. We saw notifications in the demo briefly, and I want to talk about them in a bit more depth here. There are two kinds of notifications you can see in Salesforce1: in-app and push notifications. You can enable or disable them for your organization under the mobile administration node in setup, which you see a screenshot there. In-app notifications show up under the bell icon in Salesforce1, which we saw in the demo. This is where your users can find approval request notifications, task assignments, feed activities such as when they're @mentioned in a post. In-app notifications are available in both the browser version and the downloadable app versions of Salesforce1, and are either on for everyone or off for everyone. Push notifications can appear as banners or pop-ups and are only available in the Salesforce1 downloadable app. If you've enabled them for your organization, individual users can decide for themselves whether they want to see them by adjusting their mobile device settings.
And one thing I just want to call out really briefly there is the difference between the downloadable app and the web app is that the example I was just doing on the emulator is basically the same as using Safari in iOS and pointing to Salesforce and logging in as your typical user. And so I get the HTML5 version of the app. The downloadable app is actually a hybrid app, and it's more tied into the operating system of your phone, and so, or your mobile device. And so it actually has the ability to receive things like push notifications, which a web browser doesn't necessarily have access to.
Right. We also looked at mobile navigation, and I want to call out a few things about how it works. As Shannon mentioned in the demo, the recents section, which is outlined there in yellow, maps to the Smart Search Items node that we saw in the mobile navigation customization screen in Salesforce. And the items that display in the Recents section are driven by users' search activity in Salesforce. Anything you put below the Smart Search Items node when you're customizing the navigation menu goes into the Apps section, down there where you see Tasks and Dashboards. Users can stick their most important objects to the top of the Recent section by pinning them in the search results in the full site. And you can see a screenshot of that right there on the right. List views. What we're seeing here is the driver's list views of her deliveries in the demo. If she clicks into her My Deliveries view, she sees preview cards giving her quick details of each delivery. And I want to make sure you understand that preview cards in the list view are not driven by compact layouts like the record preview cards are, but are instead driven by the list view columns.
And again, it's going to show the first 5 columns in the list view. And it'll also pull in the first 20 records in the list view. And after that, you'll have to click a More button to see the next 20 records, because we don't want to download an entire list view on your phone if you have hundreds of records.
Here's the record detail for one of our driver's deliveries. All the buttons and fields from your page layouts will be here. The actions are accessible from the blue plus icon. And as Shannon mentioned in the demo, the compact layout drives the content in the highlights section at the top.
And I'm just going to call out, just for a quick call out here, the buttons that are already in your page layout are there, but right now we don't support JavaScript buttons or URL buttons, so only your Visualforce buttons are going to show up so far.
Right, and if you're on the record detail page, sure, when you swipe right, you get to the related information. And this is where your related lists and mobile cards are going to show up from your page layout. So any Visualforce pages you've added to your mobile cards, any expanded lookups, and your related lists are all going to show up here. As we saw in the demo, you get to your actions by tapping the blue actions icon. When you tap it, you see the actions that you've assigned to your page layout. And one key thing to remember about actions is that you can customize the actions layouts to limit the fields to only the ones that you want the user to see, as we saw Shannon do, adding only 2 of the fields of the 4 that needed to be done in the action. You can use the predefined values, as we saw, to set the known values behind the scenes. And one little tidbit I'd like to throw out here is that I don't know if any of you have tried this, but you can drag that little blue icon back and forth from one corner to the other if you're using the downloadable app.
It doesn't work in the emulator.
Yeah, it doesn't work in the emulator.
All right, so let's just super quickly recap on those things to consider when building for mobile, because we can supply you with the tools, but there's really a lot of thinking to be done about how to make these things work for your users. If you go too far in one way or the other, you can end up making things less usable instead of more so. So the important things to see at a glance, these are your compact layouts and how they're going to show up in the record homepage and other details pages, with how they're going to show up in the mobile cards. The important moments when using the app, these are your custom actions. You're going to think about all of the things that the user does when they actually need to have at their fingertips. And one of the important things to think about that is sometimes records have a really long life cycle, and there are things that are important at one stage that are not important later, or things that you do all the time versus things that you do infrequently. And so if you end up creating 50 different actions, and you're going to have something that's less efficient because the user's going to have to flip through all of those action screens to find the action that they care about, and there's only 6 on a page. So you really want to limit it to the things that are happening more frequently, and let the user, for things that they don't do very frequently, let them go in and actually do the full edit. Form fields that have to have content. This again is looking at actions and which fields you want to put in an action, which fields really need to be filled out in that particular situation and which fields do not. And what defaults can we use? And these are our predefined values so that the field values don't need to be entered manually. And we saw in the case of exception or accepting delivery that we could set the actual time in the background, and we could check the status in the background, things that we know values of for that action at that time. We don't have to have the user enter. And these are good for a couple of reasons. One is you don't have to type them in on that tiny phone keyboard, but also it really can help your data integrity if you don't have people typing in things manually. So everything we've done today, you can try out yourself. And one way you can do this, if you don't want to use your organization's actual org, and this is probably wise when you're getting started with things, you can sign up for a free developer edition org from developer.salesforce.com. And a developer edition, don't let the name fool you, it's not just for developers. It's basically has all of the features that an enterprise edition org will have. And so it has workflow, it has a lot of new tools that you normally have to purchase, like sites, things that you can play around and try out. And it's free, it doesn't expire, there's no credit card required to sign up for it. And as long as you keep using it, it will keep going. I have about, well, one every time I do a demo. And the other thing that is really useful with these orgs, and probably the reason why I have one every time I need to do a demo, is that it's a lot easier to demonstrate the power of what you're thinking about doing and how you want to implement it if you have the real thing. And so if you have an organization that really isn't ready to make the leap into mobile yet or hasn't thought too far about it, this gives you a tremendous amount of power as an administrator to really help them move in that direction and deliver a lot of value to your organization and to your users. You can go in, you can say, this is how I think it's going to work. You can build out all the customizations that you want, and then you can demonstrate it right on your phone if you want to. You can give someone a login and actually have them log into the DE org in Safari on their phone, or you can also, one super quick tip, and I am not speaking very well today, is if you go to your app URL and then 1/1.app, you can get the actual web version of your app, the same one I was running in the emulator, on your web browser. And so you can actually try it all out and see what it's doing and look at all the different objects and so on and all of your functionality and actions right there. And it saves you from having to download a simulator or actually install it on your phone and check it out on your phone. Now, there is a difference between what's available on the downloadable app versus what's available in the web app, and there are a couple of things that don't work quite as well in a web browser as they do on the phone. But for the most part, you're going to get most of the functionality in the web browser that you would have gotten on the phone. The other thing we really want to call out here is the Salesforce1 Dev Guide, and I will let Michelle talk about this because she is one of the writers.
Thank you. Yeah, don't let the name fool you or discourage you. The Salesforce1 Dev Guide is not just for developers. It is actually a bundle of both the Salesforce1 Admin Guide and the Developer Guide together in one. So if you pick it up, you can run through the administrator pieces in the first half of the book. And if you're inclined to, and I would absolutely recommend it if you're curious, walk through some of the lessons in the Dev Guide piece. It's written like a workbook, so you walk through exercises, and we've provided sample code for you, so there's nothing you need to do to code. But I would definitely encourage you to pick it up and flex your muscles and try it out.
So we talked about the Dev Guide, some additional resources. There is a Publisher Actions implementation guide that talks about all of the things that you can do with actions. There's also, stepping a little bit further away from Salesforce1 here, there's the Introduction to Salesforce App Development on Udacity, and I'll talk about that in just a second. For people who are, once you've gone through the declarative stuff that we've talked about today, and if you're interested in exploring a little further, just last week or the week before, there was a webinar on Introduction to Salesforce Mobile App Development. You can sort of take that as the next step, and here's a link here. There are Force.com workbooks on most of our customization tools, including all of the Force.com declarative tools and analytics and some of the other things. that we offer. And of course, there are always sessions at Dreamforce on the things that we've talked about today as well. We'll talk one more time about the Udacity course. This is something new that the developer evangelism team put out not too long ago. It actually has a series of videos and work exercises to help you go through the online training and build mobile apps. It's free, and you can just go to the URL here, and we'll also make sure that these URLs are posted later so that you can access them. How is the default order in the list view set? The user's going to see, and also someone earlier asked which list views you see. You'll either see all of the list views that are visible or the last 4 recently used if you have more than 4. And the sort order is whatever is, the sort order of the list views is the most recently used. But the sort order of the records in the list view are whatever column you sorted in the last time you looked at the web app. I know they're looking at ways to sort and filter list views right now. I don't think it'll be Spring 14. This is one of those forward-looking statements, but I know they're working on it, and it should be coming soon.
Okay, another question is, how can I bring Canvas apps into the left navigation of Salesforce1? That was delivered as of Spring 14, and there's a chapter about Canvas apps in Salesforce1 in the developer guide as well. So if you're curious about that, pick up the developer guide and look for the Canvas apps chapter.
But basically, when you get that mobile navigation screen, any of your Canvas apps that are available, sort of available in Salesforce1, or your Visualforce pages that are enabled for mobile will show up in that left-hand side in the list of available items to put in the menu. Can you customize which list views show up in the mobile page? Not at this time.
If a user never logs into the Salesforce app via the desktop, i.e. is a mobile user only, what list views will be displayed?
That is a good question. I don't know the answer.
I don't either, but we'll find out, and we'll see if we can answer it for you and post the answer for you.
Yeah, I believe usually we end up posting these on the, we usually end up posting these questions later so that people can find answers after the fact.
There's a question about having an object pinned to the search, but it's not coming through on Salesforce1, and whether we have any suggestions for that. We want to make sure that you know that any object you pin has to have a tab created for it, and that tab has to be associated with an app in Salesforce. So the tab needs to be in an app tab set in order to be surfaced in Salesforce1.
Yeah, that's one limitation that we have right now that I know that the search team is working on, is that if the tab's not actually visible in an existing app or tab set like Sales Cloud or Service Cloud or the Deliveries app or one of your other custom apps, right now it doesn't show up in search results and it doesn't show up in that list of tabs. But we're working on fixing that probably summer 14.
Apparently the survey link is incorrect on the slide, so switch back to the Q&A list, Q&A slide. One of our organizers shared the link to the right survey on the GoToWebinar panel. We'll share that. After we're done here.
You want to keep going through the questions, and I'm just going to actually super quickly fix that.
Okay, good. One of the other questions was, is it possible to create and surface apps hosted in Heroku on Salesforce1, and what about database.com? Unfortunately, we're no longer selling database.com, but if you have a database.com account, you can build apps on it, but we recommend you use force.com instead. And it is possible to surface apps created on Heroku and Salesforce1 using Canvas and connected apps. And so check out the release notes from Spring 14 to see more information about Canvas capabilities in Salesforce1.
And the main reason why database.com apps won't, objects won't show up in here is because there's actually no UI layer in database.com, and this is using your existing Salesforce1 UI metadata to render on. Yeah. Okay. I fixed the link. It's Salesforce1 no code.
We had several people actually ask about the emulator you were using.
That is the emulator that is included in Xcode, which if you are a Mac user, you can download from the App Store, and and it's just included as a separate tool along with Xcode. There are other emulators. I don't know what most of our Windows users are using, but you don't necessarily need an emulator. You can, in fact, just use it in the web browser. And the other thing you can do if you are using the emulator is super quick here. If you open the page in Safari first, and then you'll get an option to actually save it to your desktop. You then save it to your desktop, as I have here. Then you will get it without the browser Chrome, so you won't have the URLs at the top. You actually get it in a full screen version, which is super nice.
Right. Another question is, how do I control what Salesforce objects show up in Salesforce1? As far as I know, right now there's no way to show some and not others. I don't think you can, tell an object not to show up in Salesforce1.
Mm.
The only customization that we can do is through pinning to control whether it shows up at the top of your recent section.
You can, if the tab is hidden from the user,
right,
they won't see it. And if the tab doesn't exist in any tab sets or any apps, then they also won't see it. But in both those cases, it also makes it very difficult for you to see it in the desktop app. So that may not be a good solution for you. Oh, how deliveries would appear in the order of delivery time. So in my list view, I actually had the list view sorted by delivery time in a descending order, and that's why they showed up in the list in Salesforce1 in the same way. So any customizations that you've made in the list view are also in the desktop are also going to be reflected in Salesforce1. And as I said, I know they are working on ways to be able to sort this in the future from the mobile app, but for now, that's where it's coming from.
Another question is, Salesforce1 tends to be slow for me. What can we do as admins to maximize how quickly Salesforce1 works? For example, will an account load faster if the compact layouts have a minimum number of fields?
The compact layout only controls the record home set, like that anchor panel at the top of the page with the 4 fields. So it doesn't really have a lot of fields on it to begin with, and you can add up to 10 to the compact layout, but it's still only going to show the first 4 that the particular viewing user has access to. So it's going to honor FLS, and it's going to bump the other ones up the chain if they don't have access to the field because it's not visible to their profile.
In terms of page layouts, though, there are things you can do to optimize your page layouts for the mobile experience, and especially going through and reviewing what fields you have on the page layout, and seeing whether you really need them on there or not, and setting up defaults or predefined fields, predefined values for those fields on the mobile experience.
That's only going to work on your compact layout.
Right. I'm sorry.
Sorry, on your actions. Yeah, I mean, I think what you're asking, or I'm sure somebody else will have asked it, is whether or not there's a mobile-only view right now, and there is not, so it is going to use your regular page layouts. If you have a user who specifically spends most of their time on the mobile device, as our delivery driver might, then you can do a lot of optimizations and make sure that they only have what they need at the time. But if you have an object that has 800 fields on it, then it's going to be slower. It is only going to load, I believe it only loads the first n fields on the page. It doesn't actually try to load all of them at the same time unless you click more. But
and there's a topic in the Salesforce1 admin guide with recommendations on how to optimize your page layouts for mobile. Another question is Salesforce1 included in Enterprise Edition? Why, yes, it is.
It's actually available in all editions, right, and there is no extra cost. Organizations when complete. So a question here is, how do we share with our organizations when complete, post on our website or through iTunes, Google Play? Your users can download it through iTunes or Google Play onto their phones. And then any changes that you make will just automatically become available to them. And then on our website, you can actually provide them with a link to, again, just like you, they can go through Safari on their phone and go to their usual URL, log in, and then look at 1/1.app. You can control whether they can see the web version in the settings. There is a checkbox that says allow people to access it through the web versus through the mobile device. So if you don't want them accessing it on the desktop, like I just showed, or through the browser, you can turn that off.
Can you have a completely different mobile layout from the web page layout? I think you answered that before, and unfortunately, no, not yet.
Record creation by record types. If you use the new button on the lists to create a new record, it will prompt you for the record type. Publisher actions, actually this is interesting and I should have covered this. Actions are actually created per record type, and so in the example of the delivery that I had, if we had an action to create a new delivery and we had two record types such as air versus truck, we would actually create two publisher actions in that case. One would be an air delivery and one would be a truck delivery, and we would then associate which fields we wanted on those specific actions. And part of the reason for this is we want to make it super fast. We don't want you to have to choose the record type first, and part of it is that when it's in the publisher, it's going to just pop up the form directly, and we can't actually change the record type and change all the fields on the form and the pick list values and the other things that get changed when you have different record types and different layouts.
Another question is, can you create an action or global action that shows in Salesforce1 but not in the browser? And the answer is no. That's something that we've had other people ask about as well, and no, we can't, not yet. Safer.
Wait, any way to control what shows in the related information cards for child records? That is controlled by your compact layout. So if you have I guess there's two ways to look at that question. One is if we're talking about the related information cards that I showed in the mobile cards, that's using the compact layout for in our case for the account object. The other possibility is the actual related list items. We don't actually show any fields from the related list. We only show that there is a related list, and you drill into it, and then you get the page layout for the child record.
Right. Okay, I think that's it. It's time.
All right. So thank you, everybody, so much for joining us today. If you have additional questions, you can still post them on Twitter, and we'll sort of be keeping an eye out on them. And we will be recording the webinar and sending you an email to the content and posting it on YouTube, and we'll be posting the questions somewhere. There's also, we can also post questions to the developer forums at developer.salesforce.com/forums. And again, thank you very much for joining us today.
Yes, thank you.